Yo, welcome back to another team preview. This time we're going over the New Orleans Saints. And obviously, if you're here for the first time, don't make it the last time. We're going over all 32 teams. Every single player, every player so far we're through the New Orleans Saints alphabetical order. You can go back and watch. Each episode has been timestamped. The New Orleans Saints pretty much look like the same team that they did exactly a year ago. No major pieces in the offseason, no major pieces in the draft. This Saints team pretty much looks exactly like it did last year. The only thing is there's been a change at coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers. Kubiak will now be the offense coordinator running the show here. He was a passing game coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. So we'll obviously see elements of that, of what the Niners attack look like, but the cast of characters is the same. So to start off, obviously we got to talk about the quarterback position, talk about Derek Carr. And Derek Carr, in fantasy, he's always been a decent but never great QB, never more than like QB2 in fantasy. But for fantasy purposes, he's been a QB 12 through 20 his entire career. 12 through 20. And he's never been more than a QB2, never been less than a QB2. So, he had 3,800 yards last year, 25 touchdowns. He's 33 years old. This isn't a time we're going to be buying Derek Carr just because, there's a new coordinator in the building. We're not going to be buying a Derek Carr resurgence. He is who he is. If anything, we're looking at how much time does Derek Carr have left as a Saints starter. Now, he just restructured his contract, so obviously they bought him some time there. But, when it comes to Derek Carr, you know what you're getting. No rushing, somewhere close to 4,000 yards, somewhere close to 20 to 25 touchdowns. It is what it is. So nothing more than that. I wouldn't expect anything great out of this offense, especially not being led by Derek Carr, unfortunately. I think he's good, but not great. And he'll have this team where they're supposed to be somewhere around 500, chasing the playoff spot, a wild card spot. It is what it is. And Spencer Rattler is right behind him. Team drafted him. We talked about not a whole lot of pieces. I still think he backs up Carr at least for a year, maybe even two. But Spencer Rattler would be next in line if anything were to happen to Derek Carr. He struggles or the Saints don't see this wild card berth or playoff run. I think Spencer Rattler would be next in line, all right? Where we can start to look for a little bit of value or maybe some things changing on this team is at running back for the Saints. Alvin Kamara last year was the RB11, and you might be like, sounds about right. Alvin Kamara, he's 28 years old. He's on the downswing of his career. He did that without 3 games. Remember, he was suspended for 3 games. So he was still the running back 11, and he only played in 13 games. He actually missed 4 games total this last season. He only had, close to 700 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, but his major damage was through the air. 75 catches, over 450 yards in the air. So, Kamara was a lot of people. He slipped last year in drafts in a major way. He was going like 6th, 7th round in some drafts. And if you were able to get him early, especially in like your best ball leagues, you found a lot of value with Alvin Kamara because we didn't know how long he was going to be suspended. But now that he's coming in full offseason, no suspension, I think Kamara might even be somewhat still a value. Like we're going to get him at RB2 levels. He should be in the RB1 conversation almost no matter what. So I know he's 28 years old. To me, there was no drop off. He had double digits in every single game, but the last 2 games last season that he played in. Every single game, he was a double-digit running back. So we know he's going to get involved in the passing game. Know he's going to get involved in the run game. Know they're going to use him at times in the red zone. I have no issues with Alvin Kamara anywhere between 10 and 15. If you want to put him anywhere in there, I'm more than good with that. And I think he has upside to finish in the top 10 this season. Pretty, he doesn't get injured a lot. I'll say that. He stays pretty healthy throughout the season. Obviously, Jamaal Williams was the major key to this team last year, backup-wise, right? He was brought in from the Lions where he led the league in touchdowns. Didn't have anywhere close to that last year. Got his only touchdown in the final game of last season. And he's pretty much going to play the same role this year. I still expect Alvin Kamara to lead this backfield. But where it gets interesting, obviously Jamaal Williams, more so of a short yardage guy, wasn't too like – he didn't really have a big role for this team. They used Taysom Hill and short yardage stuff too. So Jamaal Williams, even with the improvements with the offense, I still don't think it's him that is the beneficiary. We talk about Kendre Miller now. I think this is a player that can play much better in year 2 and will have a bigger role. He didn't really do much in his rookie year until the very last game of the season when he got opportunity. He had 73 yards and a touchdown. So I think he still would need some kind of injury to Alvin Kamara, who might be used as like the Saints version of CMC even more so this year. I think Kendre Miller will have a role on this team, but it would be if something were to happen to Kamara, I think we could see really nice usage out of Kendre Miller. So he was a rookie last year, played decent at the end of the season, like I mentioned. Not a whole lot of upside unless something happens injury-wise to one of these backs. I think he does have the potential to be the RB2 in this offense over Jamaal Williams, though, in most circumstances. I'd say that. And then let's get to the receivers. So Chris Olave had a good second year. He was a wide receiver 16 overall. So, he was being drafted as like a top 12 receiver. I think coming into this year, most people are going to expect him to be a top 12 receiver. The only problem is I really expect similar numbers to what he had last season. 87 catches on 130 targets, 1,123 yards, 5 TDs. So it's like we know Derek Carr will throw him the ball downfield. But what are we really expecting? Like, he's not going to become this, 170 target hog. That's not Chris Olave's game. He's not going to become this touchdown machine. They have other players in the red zone, and that can get a little bit more separation in the red zone. You win, you know what I'm saying? Like on the tough contested catches. And he only had 1,100 yards last year, 1,123. He had about 1,000. It was a little over 1,087 or something like that is his rookie year. So when we're talking about Chris Olave, like, what's really the upside? You think he can get to 100 catches? You think he can get to 8 to 10 touchdowns? Great, but that's still like maybe back end wide receiver 1 numbers. Like, unless he hits 1,500 yards, why are we taking Chris Olave in the top 10 or 12? So I'd be careful with him expecting too much. I don't really like his ADP. If it's down near 15, I think I'd be much more apt to draft Chris Olave. But when it starts creeping up into like top 10 territory, that's where I'd be, a little bit more guarded. So just watch Chris Olave's ADP as it goes. I think if he goes too early, it's no value. I think if he goes about 5 spots later than that, it probably is good value. All right. Where, Rashid Shaheed was the other wide receiver on the team last year. He was a wide receiver 44 on the season. Obviously, Michael Thomas was in the fold early on. He ended up getting hurt. He's no longer on the Saints. But Rashid Shaheed had 46 catches, 719 yards, 5 TDs, right? He could be somewhat of a sleeper, especially in your non-PPR leagues, right? He'd need to be a little bit more consistent and show a little bit more consistency. But, it's going to be tough for him to do because he's more of a deep threat, right, in the receiving game. So I think Shaheed could have nice flex value at some point this year, especially if Olave got banged up at some point. Shaheed could step in and have a nice role. But for the most part, I think he's going to be an inconsistent flex. That'll probably be best in best ball as opposed to in your standard league. So if you were taking a Hail Mary on him later in your draft and, maybe you got lucky later in the year, cool. But I think for what you can get out of Shaheed, I'm not expecting, much more than flex appeal during bye weeks unless something else happens. I think he'll be very inconsistent and a tough player to trust, even if he plays well. He was a wide receiver 44 last year. So he was wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5S even last season. All right. Just know that. And it's a pretty similar role this year. Team also got Cedrick Wilson. He'll be the wide receiver 3 this year, probably competing with A.T. Perry. Ain't really seen much from Cedrick Wilson that says he's redraft worthy, best ball worthy, anything worthy. Best season was with the Cowboys in a contract year before he went to the Dolphins. So outside of Cedrick Wilson, A.T. Perry, there's really no other receiving options you need to know on this team. At tight end, we did see Juwan Johnson, and I was on the hype train for Juwan Johnson. I think he's a very good football player. Let me change that. I think Juwan Johnson's a good football player. I think he's a very good football player, but he has good size. And I think he kind of disappointed my expectations last year. But he had some really nice games down the stretch last year. 3 out of his last 4 games, he had a touchdown. And we were starting to see double-digit performances out of Juwan Johnson, who Derek Carr earlier in the season said that was his guy. He liked Juwan Johnson. And so we saw flashes of it, never anything consistent. Taysom Hill was playing a role. We saw Chris Olave obviously turn up last year. Alvin Kamara played a lot when his return came around. So I think Juwan Johnson is one of those players that if you get him as a tight end 3, you're good. And most leagues you don't need a third tight end, right? Unless you're doing tight end premium or something, or a really, really deep league. I think he belongs on waivers, more of a name to watch than anything. I'm not overly concerned with Juwan Johnson this season. Other tight end on this team, Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill now, obviously tight end / quarterback / running back / receiver. In most leagues, he's categorized as a tight end, and that's I think they took away a lot of his quarterback eligibility in leagues. But he finishes the tight end 12 last year. And so the only thing with Taysom Hill is that his value is in the blow-up games. That's where you find the value. He's going to be inconsistent. So this will either, if your team has a lot of consistency around it, I think we'll see a lot of the same when it comes to Taysom Hill, some mega weeks, some blow up weeks, and then some straight up duds. There's talks that they want to utilize him even more this season. He's 33 years old. He got a nice paycheck. Like, there's talks that they want to use him a little bit more. We'll see, because we've heard that with Taysom Hill before. But last year he had 7 games over 11 fantasy points, which at tight end, that kind of carries your team. Like, when you can have 10 plus points, if you get double digits from your tight end, that's a win for most teams, right? And then he also had 7 games under 5 fantasy points. So really, it comes down to what can they get out of Taysom Hill on a consistent basis. And I think for our fantasy teams, we just got to kind of know what we're expecting. He's been a top 12 option at tight end 3 of the last 4 seasons. So take it for what it's worth, man. You're going to be able to get him as a tight end too. Not a lot of people will reach on him. He's been valuable over the last couple seasons. We'll see if it remains. Like I said, a lot of the same when it comes to the Saints team. Not a whole lot has changed. We'll see what the new look offense looks like. But I'm expecting still Alvin, Kamara to be a big part of this offense, Chris Olave to be a big part of this offense. And then the wild cards. You have the Rashid Shaheed, you have Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson every now and then. I'm sure Cedrick Wilson or A.T. Perry at some point every now and then. That's what it is. All right. Until the next one, peace out.